As we and everybody else expected, the RBA board remained on hold at its December meeting. The cash rate is still at 4.35%. But there was a really important shift in their language. The not ruling anything in or out language is gone. So is the word vigilant. The RBA is no longer contemplating hiking rates. Instead, they're getting used to the idea that they're getting closer to the point at which they'll start cutting rates. And in her post-meeting media conference, Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock acknowledged that there were states of the world where they might even be cutting as early as February. Now, that's not our base case at the moment. Our assessment is that the most likely scenario is that they will wait until May. But as we said at the time, we couldn't rule out an earlier start date to rate cuts. And there's certainly some data flow that suggested that that would be a more appropriate policy setting. It really depends on what happens from here. The RBA is looking for good results on inflation, but it's also looking to see what happens on the labour market and consumer spending. It currently assesses that aggregate demand outstrips aggregate supply. And while Everett believes that, it's going to be pretty cautious about starting to cut rates. It's going to want to see inflation clearly on the path down towards the inflation target of 2 to 3%. And it's going to be looking at trimmed mean inflation as the best guide to that underlying momentum. So while ever trimmed mean inflation remains too high, the Reserve Bank will be assessing that aggregate demand is outstripping aggregate supply. It also assesses that the labour market is still tight, even though wages growth is falling quite quickly and has undershot their own expectations. Overall, we think that the language has shifted enough that we need to put a bit more credence to the idea that they go earlier, but it's still likely that they wait until they're really sure. So even though we think the most likely scenario is that the RBA waits until May to start cutting rates, we think a February or April start date isn't entirely out of the question. We need to see how the data go from here, whether inflation continues to fall, and whether the labour market continues to record strong employment growth.